In a perfect world, if you like erupting volcanoes and wandering dinosaurs that don't care about your personal business, our story begins. And in another corner of this miserable planet, specifically in a forest whose designer seemed to be having a bad day, someone was walking cautiously among the corpses of warriors as if on a very unsuccessful morning stroll. Suddenly, as all clichés dictate, a terrifying monster with glowing red eyes jumped in the face of a poor young man who in turn was surprised and terrified as if someone had just told him his internet subscription had expired. And of course, fierce battles broke out between the good humans and the evil savage creatures. In the midst of this chaos, a blue glow shone in our young hero's eyes, unleashing a latent power, because that's what always happens in these stories, right? He moved at a speed beyond the comprehension of logic, using his sword with a skill that would make any sushi chef jealous, delivering swift and powerful strikes, and turning every monster in his way into small pieces. But wait, it seems all this heroism was just a silly commercial on a giant screen in the middle of a ruined city, promoting the Dispatch to the Worlds program, describing it as the future. And there, a young man with brown hair stood, staring at the ad screaming, "Apply now," in his face, lost in a daydream. And before his dream of becoming the savior hero could be completed, a rough hand grabbed his shoulder to bring him back to bitter reality. He turned to find his boss, an old man from whose life happiness seemed to have long retired, scolding him loudly, asking why he was wasting his precious time staring instead of working. The young man bowed apologetically while his boss continued his usual lecture about how the problem with this generation's youth is their strange dreams that are utterly useless. Then he ordered him in a tone that brooked no argument to hurry up and remove some climbing plants. Our hero immediately agreed and set off, carrying a small sickle, his weapon in the battle against unemployment. Anxiety gnawed at him, fearing he would be fired again, as it was clear that drawing attention on his first day was not a good move. In the background, his boss's grumbling voice continued like the soundtrack to his miserable life. But suddenly, the old man fell silent, his eyes widening in astonishment as he saw the young man removing the plants with superhuman speed and efficiency. In moments, all those damn plants were piled into large bags. For the first time, the old man showed his admiration, admitting that it's rare to see such a hard-working young man these days, and rewarded him by letting him go home early. The young man carried the bag on his shoulder, but despite the compliment, a sad look crossed his face, thinking that the idea of joining that heroic dispatch was nothing but a distant dream for someone like him. We later learned that planet Earth was done for, destroyed and drained of its vitality, just like an online game whose servers had been shut down. It was then that a mysterious absolute being appeared and offered the magical solution, dispatch to another world. The heroes, or as they were called, the dispatched, abandoned this ruined planet for other worlds, barely managing to preserve what was left of life on Earth by bringing vitality back with them as souvenirs. The young man held his sickle, looking at the distant horizon, sarcastically wondering if he could ever become one of those superheroes. After finishing his work, he walked through the deserted streets sighing, his only hope in life being called in for tomorrow's job of removing more plants. He made his way to a building crowded with people, and after pushing and shoving with difficulty, he finally reached a government employee's desk. The young man introduced himself as Oh Shan-su, and told the employee he had come to check on any progress in the family reunion investigation he had requested. The employee glanced at his screen, which displayed the details of his investigation deposit balance, revealing that he had paid a fortune to search for his dispatched family, but the current balance was still insufficient. With all the coldness in the world, the employee told him that this esteemed institution doesn't work for free, and suggested he come back when he decides to have money, before calling for the next victim in the endless queue. Meanwhile, another man rushed past everyone, begging for any information, anything, even just the name of the world that had swallowed his family. As usual, someone from the angry crowd yelled at him, reminding him that he wasn't the only one living a tragedy in this world, while our hero Chan-su quietly slipped away from this desperate circus. He returned to his dark home, announcing his arrival to complete emptiness, only to be greeted by an empty food can rolling across the floor in a pathetically dramatic scene. Memories flooded back. He remembered how his father was a high-ranking returnee, a true hero. But as the situation on the planet worsened, he was dispatched again on what seemed to be a one-way mission, because he never came back. Then he remembered his mother telling him she would follow his father with his grandmother, promising to return quickly, asking him to wait just a few days. But it seems a few days in their dictionary meant forever, as she too disappeared, leaving him alone to fend for himself. And now, after all this time, his memories of them had become so faint that he could barely piece together their faces in his mind. Suddenly, his world decided to dance with him. Everything around him shook and a bright light appeared, making him wonder about the source of this annoying commotion. A violent tremor threw him across the room like a worn-out doll, his head hitting the wall, and a clock falling on him as a comedic culmination of this tragic moment. After regaining consciousness from this unexpected shock, he wondered, What the hell just happened? Feeling a terrible pain in his head, he grabbed his phone to find a disaster alert stating that a shockwave from the return of a returnee had caused the earthquake and flash. And right below that news, there was another breaking news story that shocked him more than the wall. The legendary S-Class returnee was announcing his retirement. He wondered in confusion as he read the details of the news. In a televised interview, the injured returnee appeared, stating that he had failed to protect the god, had lost all his comrades, and had no choice but to return alone like a coward. Because of this epic failure, he no longer had the qualifications or the desire to go on another mission, so he was announcing his retirement, begging everyone not to lose hope and to protect the Earth themselves. This was followed by grim headlines wondering how Earth would survive now that the heroes were starting to withdraw, especially since the population had dropped to less than 500 million. Our hero sat in his dark room, feeling frustrated by the mission's failure and this retirement that came at the worst possible time. In the midst of his despair, he heard a sound at the door. Who could be visiting him at this hour? He didn't remember having any friends. He walked toward the door with weary steps, and then a strange creature appeared. A rabbit wearing an elegant suit and a tie, asking politely if Mr. Oh Shan-su was present. He opened the door cautiously, expecting it to be perhaps the strangest joke in the history of the planet, only to freeze in place before this surreal scene. From the shock, he fell backward, screaming at the top of his lungs, as the last thing he expected at the end of this dreadful day was to find a talking rabbit on his doorstep. The rabbit creature tried to calm our hero, asking him to be quiet because he had very good news, and then enthusiastically congratulated him on being chosen to become a dispatched, as if he had just won a free trip. Shan-su looked at him in utter confusion, wondering what kind of hallucination this was that made rabbits talk and offer cosmic job opportunities. The rabbit showed complete understanding of his state of confusion, an expression he seemed to have practiced a lot, but he assured him that the decision of his selection was real and beyond doubt. To prove his point, he pulled out an official ID card from the Global Dispatch Support Center, suggesting they change location if he still thought it was an elaborate prank. As they were walking, the rabbit asked him if he had any special talents, pointing out that most humans have at least one. Shan-su answered with brutal honesty that, as the rabbit probably knew, he was completely unqualified for this mission. He explained that the only thing he excelled at was trimming trees and flowers, and he didn't think super gardener was a sought-after class in other worlds. The rabbit was comically shocked, to which Shan-su asked if he didn't already know that. But the rabbit quickly recovered with diplomatic grace, assuring him that it was okay and that everything happens for a reason. He then reassured him that the fact of his selection still stood, so there was no need to worry, which prompted Shan-su to thank this strange creature for his unexpected psychological support. He looked around in amazement, unable to believe he was finally at the dispatch center, and felt that his long-awaited chance to change his miserable life had finally come. The rabbit suggested entering through a huge, lavish door to continue their conversation, and he was mesmerized by the size of the door, thinking that glory and other worlds lay just behind it. With all his might, he tried to push the giant door, but it didn't budge an inch. The rabbit asked him coolly, "What are you doing?" explaining that the real entrance was somewhere else entirely, and then pointed to a very small door, perfectly sized for rabbits only. Shan-su protested angrily, wondering how he was supposed to pass through an opening of this size. The rabbit replied that he could enter easily, to which Shan-su yelled in his face, "That's because you're a rabbit." He felt extremely frustrated and announced he was going home, having had enough of this farce. But the rabbit stopped him, reminding him that he had failed every previous test and was deemed unqualified, sarcastically asking if he really thought an opportunity like this would knock on his door twice. He added that he was quoting Shan-su's own thoughts that had been running through his head, expressing his deep regret for his decision to go home after being chosen with such great difficulty. In the end, he resigned himself to his fate, got down on his hands and knees, and began to crawl through the small entrance in the most humiliating scene of his life, while the rabbit hurried him from inside without any consideration for his feelings. After managing to get inside, he stood up to find that the room looked disappointingly ordinary. The rabbit told him he had a perfect world suited for him, explaining that there are different worlds for different people, and then enthusiastically offered him a world named Land Grabbing with a Template System. Shan-su furrowed his brows, puzzled by the name that sounded like a cheap video game title, while the rabbit got flustered, suspecting Shan-su might have heard of this world, but he admitted he had never heard of it, asking worriedly if it was a strange place, just as a wicked expression appeared on the rabbit's face. The rabbit laughed and told him that this world was the most popular one at the moment, and the best part was that it was under the protection of a god. Shan-su froze completely upon hearing the word god, as he immediately remembered that returnee A, who had a breakdown on the news, had also served a god. The rabbit quickly reassured him, insisting that this had nothing to do with those unfortunate incidents, and that there was absolutely no reason to worry. Yes, definitely no reason at all. Here, The real game began. Shansu cautiously asked about the identity of this god the rabbit was talking about, expecting a majestic name. But the rabbit explained that according to the cosmic bureaucratic rules, the god is determined completely at random. But, since it was apparently his lucky day, if he decided to join right now, he would be given a very special chance to choose for himself. Like a professional street magician, he offered him 3 identical cards and asked if he was ready to choose his destiny. Our hero hesitated, admitting that his experience in choosing patron gods was 0, and he had no idea what kind of disaster he might pick. The rabbit urged him to make a decision, stressing that this was a rare, unrepeatable opportunity, and that time was running out. Shansu was finally convinced, realizing that a chance like this wouldn't come again, and silently cursed himself for his foolish hesitation. With a decisive move, as if betting his last penny, he drew one of the cards. At that moment, a giant skeletal creature with glowing purple eyes appeared before him, leading an army of the undead. The card revealed the god of banishment with a 44% probability, which shocked and stunned him so much he almost swallowed his tongue. Coldly, the rabbit informed him that the scene was just a visual presentation of the product, wondering why he was so surprised. Still under the effect of terror, Shansu replied, asking what kind of god is introduced in such a horrifying manner fit for a horror movie. He complained that the name God of Banishment itself sounded like a bad omen and a guaranteed disaster. He asked with hesitation and fear if he could perhaps draw again, and the rabbit immediately and gladly agreed, which made him thank him in confusion. He drew another card, hoping the result would be different this time, and that he would get a god who loves flowers and peace. But he screamed in frustration and despair when he discovered it was the God of Banishment card again, but this time with a higher probability of 45%. He exploded in anger at the rabbit, accusing him of cheating and deception, and wondering how he could get the same catastrophic god every single time. But with a sudden seriousness and a tone devoid of fun, the rabbit told him that there was nothing wrong with the cards, and asked him with a sharp look, "Do you understand what this means?" Shansu immediately backed away, scared of this sudden shift in the cute rabbit's personality. The rabbit announced that this was his last chance and told him to choose wisely this time. He closed his eyes, begging all the forces of the universe that the card wouldn't be negative again. He chose his last card, and suddenly a warm, comforting green light enveloped him. He opened his eyes to find with immense joy that he had finally gotten a different card. The card revealed the Goddess of Abundance, but with a nearly impossible appearance probability of 0.0000001%. Although its listed effects seemed modest, he felt extremely excited to have gotten something so rare. Immediately, Shansu began to imagine the Goddess of Abundance as a beautiful, stunning woman, a foolish and lewd expression forming on his face. The rabbit looked at him with disgust and asked what exactly he was thinking, describing his look as disgusting. After a strange moment of silence, the rabbit surprised him by asking, "Would you like another chance to draw?" Shansu was surprised by this offer, reminding the rabbit that he had said it was the last chance, then asked curiously, "And what will happen if I decide to choose this Goddess of Abundance card?" It seems our hero Shansu had fallen into an inescapable trap. After the cunning rabbit offered him the chance of a lifetime to choose a goddess of supreme beauty, here comes the annoying little condition. He must embark on his suicidal journey immediately. But don't worry, the rabbit has a genius marketing plan to convince him, telling him that this is his golden opportunity to be promoted from a mere miserable dispatched to a legendary returnee who will be an example for all. For more temptation, he paints a rosy picture of a bright future, where he will become a national hero everyone cheers for, and maybe even be crowned the savior of all humanity. What an offer that cannot be refused. The rabbit concludes his offer with a sly smile, assuring him that a whole new life awaits him, so he should think carefully about this generous offer. After moments of deep philosophical reflection, our hero reaches a genius conclusion. His current life is boring, and he will be stuck in a spiral of failure forever if he doesn't seize this opportunity. And so, with rare courage, he decides that the time has come to make a fateful decision, and it's only a matter of moments before a flashy congratulatory message appears, proudly announcing that he has become the obedient servant of the Goddess of Abundance, and that the time to meet her has come. A stunning lady with green hair appears before him, but it seems the budget wasn't enough to show her face, which remained in the shadows. She welcomes him as a potential dispatched, a less grand title than he had expected. The heavenly vision suddenly disappears and turns into a card, leaving our hero stunned on the ground, wondering if what he saw was real or just a hallucination. But it doesn't matter. A false flame of enthusiasm has ignited in his heart, and he suddenly feels capable of conquering the world as long as this mysterious goddess is on his side. With all the enthusiasm of a novice hero, he asks the rabbit about his next step, and the rabbit praises his foolishness. his excellent decision. The rabbit announces that the time for adventure has come, and instead of a golden gate befitting heroes, a purple vortex that looks like an entrance to hell appears before them. Our hero starts screaming for some time to process the situation, but the gate was hungry and started pulling him towards it. He asks the rabbit with childish concern if they are really going to enter this thing that looks angry, and the rabbit mocks his naivety, wondering how a vortex can have a mood, and invites him to enjoy its artistic beauty. As for him, all he sees is a black hole that promises him the worst journey of his life. But, in a moment of sudden courage, Shansu decides not to back down, declaring that he will prove to the whole world that he is not just a failure. And as he gathers his courage to take his first step towards glory, the rabbit gives him a little push in the form of a powerful kick that sends him straight into the arms of the unknown. And as he falls, screaming the most beautiful curses at his furry friend, the rabbit waves him goodbye, as if to say, "I wish you a happy journey, our brave hero." Then a mysterious voice asks the rabbit about the reason for this violent encouragement, and the rabbit replies that direct intervention is forbidden, but it seems that back kicks are allowed. The voice blames the rabbit, reminding him that they can't lose this boy, and asks him if he is still sticking to his failed god. To which the reply is affirmative, which proves that stupidity is not limited to humans only. Meanwhile, our hero lands in a new world, to be greeted by an electronic system window bearing bad news. The shocking information: that tiny percentage was not for the rarity of the goddess's appearance, but for the trivial size of her influence. Our hero screams an iconic scream, realizing that he has chosen a goddess with the power of a phone battery about to die. At that moment he hits the ground with force, sits amidst the ruin, contemplating his genius decisions, and how a piece of information this important reached him after it was completely too late. Excellent customer service indeed. Our hero Shansu sat desperately amidst the rubble that was supposed to be his new kingdom. Then, as a completely natural reaction, he began to laugh hysterically, finally grasping the magnitude of the disaster he had so enthusiastically thrown himself into. To make matters worse, a system window appeared before him to remind him of his genius choice, the goddess of abundance, with almost non-existent influence. He looked at the dilapidated temple around him and the barren land, wondering with bitter sarcasm where that supposed abundance was in this place that seemed to have been suffering from famine for centuries. Then another system window appeared to officially welcome him to the world of land grabbing with a template system, and gave him the title of messenger for a goddess whose name they didn't even bother to write correctly, and told him that his mission was to secure as much land as possible for her. He noticed the typo in the goddess's name, and came up with a theory that it might be because the size of his faction was so small that the system didn't recognize it. He decided he couldn't just sit around lamenting his fate, and that he had to explore the place first. Maybe he would find this legendary goddess somewhere. As he was walking, he saw a sickle lying on the ground as if it was waiting for him. He picked it up, and despite his surprise at its presence here, he felt a strange and comfortable familiarity with it, like meeting an old friend from his miserable past life. Suddenly, a huge creature with glowing eyes that lit up the darkness appeared behind him, and he froze in place with terror, realizing it was a real monster. Panic struck him. How could a monster appear before he even met his goddess boss? And he decided it was unacceptable to die in such a ridiculous way. In a desperate and heroic attempt to defend himself, he raised the sickle and threatened the terrifying creature with it. But he was surprised when it turned out that what he thought was a terrifying monster was nothing more than a small hamster trembling with fear, its eyes filled with tears. He wondered in confusion how this cute creature could be classified as a monster, especially since it didn't seem hostile at all, but rather seemed to be on the verge of a heart attack. For a moment, a greedy thought crossed his mind. Since the system considered it a monster, maybe he would get a rewarding reward if he caught it. The poor hamster was terrified by his predatory gaze and began to scream and wave its small arms in utter panic. Shansu decided to leave it alone for now, as long as it wasn't trying to eat him, and he even admitted to himself that he found it a little cute. Suddenly, he saw the hamster running away, but he noticed that it stopped every now and then and looked at him, as if inviting him to follow. Since he had no better plan, he started running after it, amazed at the incredible speed of this small creature, and wondering what new disaster it might be taking him to. After a while of running, they reached a small waterfall with clear, pure water flowing from it. He felt a great relief and filled a bottle with the water that might be the only abundant thing in this world. He sat down to rest after quenching his thirst, and asked the hamster if it lived in this place. Then, with all seriousness, he asked it if it knew where the goddess was, the owner of great abundance. But the hamster was busy licking its fur, and Shansu realized that it was impossible to have a rational conversation with it. The hamster, his unofficial tour guide, made a sound again, as if to say, "The tour is not over yet, you idiot." Shansu decided to see what other miserable surprise this creature had in store for him, so he followed it again. This time, the hamster led him to a huge and majestic tree, and he admired its size for a moment, before noticing that it was completely dry and dead, just like the trees he had left behind on Earth. At the base of the tree, he saw something strange sticking out of the ground, only to discover that he had stepped on a withered ginseng plant, wondering why such a plant would be in this desolate place. At that moment, the hamster let out a scream of terror as if the world had ended. Chansu jokingly apologized to it and asked if this root was its pet or something. At that exact moment, a system window appeared to congratulate him on discovering the god of the region. He looked around in confusion, wondering where this goddess he was supposed to have found was. The hamster started biting his foot in a desperate attempt to get his attention, so he just grabbed it with his hand in annoyance and told it he was busy looking for a god right now and would play with it later. The hamster continued to scream and resist, trying to explain the situation, and Chansu began to understand what it was getting at, wondering if what he understood was correct. He was shocked as he connected the events, wondering if this withered ginseng root could be the god itself. He refused to believe this ridiculous idea, as the goddess he was promised was a symbol of abundance and beauty, and it was impossible for her to be just a dried vegetable. And as he was lost in denial, the ginseng root that had fallen to the ground began to emit a faint green light. He immediately remembered the image of the stunning goddess he had seen, and the hamster noticed a small note at the bottom of the image that he hadn't seen before, which said, "This image may differ from the actual product," which increased the horror of his shock. He fell to his knees in utter despair, realizing that everything was a blatant hint of his stupidity. The idea of land grabbing and the percentages were not random, but rather indicated the size of each god's influence, which increased with the increase in their territory. He had ignored the god of banishment cards that appeared to him repeatedly, thinking they were a glitch, when in fact they belonged to the most powerful gods in this world. He concluded that his goddess must have shrunk to this miserable form after losing all her lands and influence completely, but he wondered why she hadn't woken up yet. And then a terrifying thought occurred to him. Was stepping on her like that the final blow that ended her life? In a desperate attempt to correct his grave mistake, he decided to water her since she looked so dry. He poured water from his bottle onto the ginseng root, and it began to glow with a stronger light, which made him think his genius plan was working. His enthusiasm grew, and he began to pour more and more water, completely ignoring the screams of the terrified hamster who was trying to stop him. Suddenly, a voice came from the ginseng root, expressing how refreshed it was by the water, the likes of which it hadn't felt in a long time. But the tone of the voice soon changed and began to complain that the amount of water was becoming too much, and then turned into a cry for help, insisting that it was about to drown and die of suffocation by water. When Chansu finally stopped trying to drown her, the goddess finally woke up, and he rejoiced like an idiot who had succeeded in fixing something he had almost broken. With artificial respect, he introduced himself to her, announcing that he was O Chansu, the messenger of abundance, as if presenting his credentials. But his joy was short-lived, as he soon noticed that his main goddess could barely move, which left him confused, as there was no instruction manual to tell him what to do now. As usual, a new system window appeared to offer him advice on using skills to become stronger. He was surprised to find that he had skills in the first place, and when he examined them, he found a skill called Blessing of Abundance, and he guessed from its name that it helped crops to flourish, which made sense. But he found another sub-skill belonging to the same blessing called Decapitation, and this bloody name made him extremely confused and anxious. Immediately, he imagined a terrifying scene of a guillotine, wondering in panic if abundance in this world meant eliminating the rich to achieve prosperity for the poor. He tried to calm himself down, wondering why the goddess of abundance would give him such a violent skill. He turned to the goddess and asked her directly if the decapitation skill really meant what he thought it did. When she didn't answer, he rephrased his question with greater anxiety, asking if she was really ordering him to cut off the heads of living creatures. She looked at him with a stern expression, and his genius mind began to work, and he concluded that since his goddess was related to agriculture, it might include animal husbandry, and therefore the skill might be related to butchery and slaughter. A horrifying thought occurred to him as he looked at the little hamster that was running happily, unaware of the fate that awaited it. Wondering if this little creature was his first official duty, he looked at it with deep regret and apologized to it in advance for what he was about to do, then raised the sickle over the terrified hamster, convincing himself that he had no other choice, as he was the goddess's messenger and had to carry out orders. At the last moment, before he could commit his foolish act, the goddess intervened and slapped the hamster out of his way, saving it from her messenger's blind devotion. He tried to justify his action by saying that he didn't want to do it, but he was doing it for her and for the supposed abundance. The poor hamster was terrified and stood behind the goddess for protection. Suddenly, both of them started screaming and pointing at Chansu to look behind him. He was surprised when he did and wondered what this thing was supposed to be. In front of him was a huge monster made of what looked like black slime with two glowing eyes. Both the goddess and the hamster trembled with fear and terror. Shansu realized that he was completely wrong, and that the hamster was not the monster, but this scary creature that had just appeared, and he doubted his ability to face something of this size. But he tightened his grip on his sickle, his favorite weapon in all his battles, and decided that he had to fight. As he rushed towards the monster, he suddenly felt that he could see its weak point with perfect clarity, as if it was lit up for him. A system window appeared telling him that he could now activate the decapitation skill. Shansu used the skill without hesitation and delivered a powerful blow with the sickle towards the monster, managing to split it in half and destroying it completely in a single moment, amazing the goddess and the hamster. After miraculously defeating the monster, Shansu rushed towards the goddess to make sure she was unharmed. Like a hero who intentionally saved the day, he noticed that the little hamster, which he had almost chopped to pieces moments before, was bravely trying to protect the goddess. Overwhelmed with deep regret for his misjudgment, he bowed to the ground in a dramatic scene, apologizing profusely for his foolishness, and humbly asked if they could forgive their foolish messenger. It seemed the hamster agreed to forgive him, or perhaps it was just too scared to refuse the offer, so Shansu thanked it warmly and decided to name it Hamdal. He asked for its opinion on the new name, and told it that it would need a name since they would be living together from now on, and Hamdal seemed very happy with this development. As usual, a system window appeared to inform him that thanks to his skill's effect, the monster's head was automatically offered as a sacrifice, and that his hunt count for immortal demons was now 1. He realized the monster he killed was called an immortal demon, and was puzzled by such a grand name for a creature that was so easy to defeat. Then, additional information appeared stating that these offerings are directly linked to the goddess. He turned towards his goddess and was surprised to see that her appearance had actually improved, looking fresher and more vibrant. He deduced with his superior intellect that if he continued to hunt these weak monsters and offer them as sacrifices, the goddess might regain her original form that he saw in the advertisement. Excited by the idea, he told the goddess he would go hunt more for her, then set off to find monsters, filled with hope as if he had found his purpose in life. He stopped when he reached the desired location, and another system window appeared, informing him of the existence of unspecified points that could be used, with a note that they could not be traded. He wondered when he had obtained these points, but decided they were a good thing anyway and didn't bother thinking about it further. He reached an area full of monsters and decided he had to get rid of them first. He felt completely confident, as his skill was very powerful and easy to use, and these monsters moved so slowly they looked like they were on a stroll. He activated the decapitation skill and wiped out a group of them with utter ease. A new system window appeared, confirming that hunting monsters did indeed grant him points. He felt pleased with himself and decided to start a challenge of hunting 100 monsters. After some time, Hamdal was sitting happily on his shoulder, and he started petting it as if it was the one who had done all the hard work. After the number of monsters he had hunted reached 101, he was still wondering why they were called immortal demons, when they died so pathetically easily. He decided he would uncover this secret later as he continued hunting. He returned to the goddess to find she had become noticeably brighter and more beautiful, which made him very happy as the effect of the hunt was better than he had expected, and he hoped she would soon regain her true form. He began to think about the next step, and the goddess pointed to the tree. He wondered if she wanted him to put her on it and picked her up. As she got closer to the tree, the goddess extended her small hand and touched it. The goddess and Hamdal started pointing at him and then at the tree, in a clear sign language that meant, "Come on, worker, do something useful." As if reading his simple thoughts, a system window appeared telling him he could use the Blessing of Abundance skill. And another window explained that all blessing skills consume points, as nothing is free in this world. Shansu finally understood that he had to use the new skill he didn't know he had until a moment ago. As a bright green light began to glow, he decided to use all the points he had painstakingly earned from hunting those poor monsters, and directed them with all his might towards the dry tree using the Blessing of Abundance skill. Energy flowed from his hands, and in moments, a miracle happened. Life returned to the huge tree, its branches grew, its leaves sprouted, and it bore fruit completely in a rapid theatrical display, with ripe red fruits glistening among the fresh green leaves. Shansu was astonished when he discovered that these fruits were apples. He picked one up and was amazed by its unnatural size and weight. He had never seen an apple like this even on Earth before it was destroyed. Despite his strong desire to devour it immediately, he remembered his duties as a faithful messenger and decided to offer the first fruit as a sacrifice to his goddess. He placed the apple in front of her, expressing his hope that she would soon return to her magnificent original form, but added that she was also very cute in her current root form. Suddenly, he watched the goddess absorb the apple in a strange and unsettling way, as she opened up like a carnivorous flower and devoured the entire fruit in an instant, which left him utterly shocked and confused. He thought to himself that it would be best never to anger her as long as she ate like that. After that, he he decided it was time for him and Hamdal to get their share of the loot. He took a bite of the apple, and a wave of happiness washed over him due to its delicious taste, the likes of which he had never experienced in his entire life. The goddess was watching him from a distance in a state of shock, wondering how this boy had managed to hunt monsters and revive a giant tree so quickly in just one day, describing him to herself as a beast-like boy. Then she began to recall her painful past. The Abundance faction had been a great power responsible for food in the world, and its strength relied on the unmatched quality of its agricultural products. But when the evil Corruption faction began to expand and take over other factions like an unstoppable plague, the peaceful Abundance faction had no choice but to flee from that overwhelming power. In order to survive, the Abundance faction abandoned farming and tried to switch to hunting monsters. But being farmers and not fighters, they couldn't win any battles and lost everything. As a last desperate solution, they modified their basic harvest skill into the decapitation skill, but the fate of the Abundance faction was already sealed, and their fall was inevitable. The goddess remembered that the decapitation skill was not originally a combat skill for killing monsters, but was merely a way to bring back the heads of already dead animals or monsters to obtain resources from them. The goddess continued to think about her past, full of defeats, realizing that the idea of turning farmers into warriors was a bad one from the start, and that modifying the skill was the best they could do under the circumstances. Of course, if there had been one incredibly strong person among them, perhaps everything would have changed, but luck was not on their side. Suddenly, her train of thought was broken when she saw Shansu approaching her with a determined look in his eyes that suggested he was about to make a world-changing decision. But he simply interrupted her deep thoughts to ask her with an innocent smile if he could have more apples. The goddess sighed, wondering what sin she had committed for the universe to send her a boy whose only concern was filling his stomach. But she decided that he was now her subordinate, and since there was no return policy, she would never abandon him. And then, unexpectedly, she clung to his leg. Shansu panicked for a moment, wondering if she was going to absorb him too, in the same way she had devoured the apple. After gathering the apples in a large bag, he gently carried the sleeping goddess in his arms, noting that she must be very tired from her eventful day of growing and watching him work. He placed her in a safe spot and told Hamdal that he had also worked hard today and deserved praise. Suddenly, a huge clap of thunder struck the clear sky, panicking him, and he worried that the sound might have woken the sleeping goddess. But he soon realized the sound wasn't thunder, but a sound coming from his own stomach, protesting loudly because he had eaten nothing but apples all day. A system window suddenly appeared, announcing a delivery event in progress. He was surprised by the existence of a delivery service in this desolate world, but guessed it was possible with the many strange things that came from Earth. However, he wondered how on Earth they could pinpoint his location to deliver any order. He noticed that Hamdal looked tired, so he suggested they sleep first and postpone thinking about the universe's mysteries until tomorrow. And he covered the goddess with some leaves as a temporary blanket. In a completely different place, in a tall, luxurious building called the Temple of Circulation, a woman was walking with confidence and anger, storming into an employee's office. The employee, who appeared to be her boss, asked her why she was here instead of carrying out the delivery assigned to her. She replied angrily, accusing him of messing with her, and told him she was up to her ears in work, and this new request made no sense at all. The details of the disastrous order appeared before her: a 2-day business trip to a restricted area, knowing that they would receive no payment due to a free shipping event, and worse, the customer wanted to pay for the order with apples because he had no money. She asked her boss if she had done something wrong to be punished this way, and he told her there was no fault on her part. On the contrary, she was just a very enthusiastic employee. He added that he also loved work, but too much overtime would harm her health, suggesting she take a mandatory break under the pretext of this business trip. He placed his hand on her shoulder and told her that if she stayed here, she would go right back to work, and it was better for her to go and have a little fun in a restricted area. She realized the bitter truth and told him she knew he was sending her because no one else in their right mind would agree to go on this trip, and he admitted it with a laugh. He added jokingly that she might get lucky and discover a hidden world there, a term for an area with special effects, in a desperate attempt to embellish the mission. The employee bid his colleague Hai Soo-jin a safe trip, and she agreed to go while cursing her luck under her breath. Soo-jin looked at the long list of orders that looked like a child's wish list, wondering why there were so many, and thought that she should prepare well for this outing in a restricted area. She clenched her fist with determination, hoping at least that all this effort wouldn't be in vain, and she would return with delicious apples. Meanwhile, Shansu was having the time of his life, spending his time playing with Hamdal and the goddess among the piles of apples he had harvested. Hamdal was trying to hide and suppress its laughter, but Shansu heard it easily and approached it playfully. He grabbed Hamdal and started jokingly scolding it for eating the apples. which were their only capital. He reminded it that these apples were not for eating but for trade, and wondered how they would face the expected visitor today if it continued to devour their supplies like this. He sighed with worry, as he didn't want to make a bad impression at his first business meeting in this world. He recalled the information he got when placing the delivery order, where he learned that this world was divided into areas called blocks, and although they looked like normal land, there were barriers at their edges, and moving between them required a likely expensive daily movement ticket. His area was completely isolated from the world, and the nearest village was a full week's walk away, and his diet was almost limited to only apples for the rest of his life. That's why he saw the arrival of the delivery service within just 2 days as a miracle. He didn't know the method they used, but he was hoping his sleeping bag would arrive soon, or a bed if possible, so he could live a life of luxury. He mentioned that he had also ordered a special comfortable pillow for the goddess, as he desperately needed to earn her favor bit by bit to avoid being devoured by her in a fit of rage. Suddenly he sensed something approaching. He had realized that the monsters had been coming to him on their own since yesterday, as if it were a special monster delivery service arriving on schedule, which confirmed his theory that they were indeed immortal monsters that kept coming back to life. Shansu decided to get rid of this trash before his guest arrived, and he faced them with superior skill using his trusty sickle. He noticed that their movements had become a little faster than before, and wondered if these monsters were getting stronger over time. But he saw that this development was still minimal, and not a cause for concern, and he continued to eliminate them with ease as if he were cutting weeds. At that exact moment, Hai Su-jin arrived in the area using her advanced winged boots, and looked down at the horrific scene below her with indescribable shock and amazement, where she saw Shansu standing with a creepy smile, surrounded by the corpses and remains of the monsters he had just destroyed.